So was Lee great tonight? Let's give her another round. I hope, Lee, one day soon we can welcome you and your family to Rancho Mirage, where you will love living here because we have a great city, don't we? So I'm very lucky because, as you know, I'm with Helene Galen, and we have a wonderful life together here in Rancho Mirage. Through Helene, I've met some really great friends, and one of them is I've asked him to introduce Dave Barry tonight. He's become really family to me. He and his wife are extraordinary. They're very involved in the community. They're from Chicago, and he's owned real estate on both sides of the Atlantic, from the Mayfair region to Mayfair in London. But what I think was extraordinary is, the London taxi. He invented it. He invented the London taxi. So we welcome to the stage, to me, the funniest man in the desert, Miles Berger.
Thank you, Jamie. First of all, just for a moment, would those of you who were not introduced prior to the beginning of this evening, please stand up. There's not a lot of you, but I thought you ought to have some recognition. Jamie, where are you? Okay, yeah. All right. This is the finale, and Dave is the last act, and that's always supposed to be the most important, and I think it probably will be. But I know, Jamie, you've gotten a lot of covet. That means praise, and well-deserved. David Bryant, your staff, absolutely outstanding, though. Everything has been fantastic. The depth, the breadth, and the skill of the panelists and the participants has been wonderful. And Jamie, I know that you were involved in every aspect of it, the program and every part of it, including the seating, which was, you said yesterday you were never going to do it. It's impossible for you not to do it. And I wonder at your health, because he kissed 274 women and 72 men in the last 2.5 days. And if you don't come down with something, I don't know who will. Almost everything I've heard has been really very good. There is some concern about the whistle. Several people have suggested, not a lot, that you might stick it somewhere else next year. But I've got one real kind of question. I'm a little confused about the introducers of the introducer, who then introduces the presenter. And it seems that the introducer of the introducer gets a build-up, and then the introducer gets a build-up, and everybody thanks everybody else. And it seemed to me you could save a lot of time if you wanted to include a lot of people. You could save a lot of time by not having 2 or 3 introducers, but just have escorters. But then you'll have to introduce the escorters, so that's not a very good idea. Where is Jan Salta? Jan, fantastic getting Dave. I don't know what you had to do, but you could have had me for half price. Maybe less. I was very pleased to be asked by Jamie. I was flattered. I didn't know why, because I don't have a hotel anymore, so whatever. But so I was very excited about it. I went out and I got 3 or 4 Dave Barry's books. I did, honest to God, and I paid full price. I went on the internet and I prepared really, really a great introduction. This is it. And it could be a eulogy, or it could be a forward to your biography, and you've done enough to have a biography, frankly. We've got people in public office who wrote biographies before they got a job. But at any rate, it was very impressive. 6 weeks later, I got a call from Jamie and said, by the way, you have 2 minutes. Well, I was a little upset. I spent the money and I did all the writing and I put all this together. And I said, why? And he said, well, because last year, and I was there last year, he said many of the introducers, the second introducer, spent more time than the presenters. So I accepted that. But I will say, Dave, that your credentials are incredible. I think what I put together and what I really was able to support was that you're sort of a combination of Will Rogers, Mark Twain, and with a little bit of Shakespeare thrown in. So it's going to be a great pleasure to introduce you when I get around to it. But on a more serious note, you've had 2.5 days of really some very, very in-depth discussions about some important subjects. And I think you will notice that in almost every case, every panel, every presenter, their presentations were laced with humor. And it's the way we deal with the human equation. Without humor, we'd all be unbearable. And taking a card from Lord Dobbs's deck. If you're here, I apologize. From his book, if you'll note, I don't know whether it was from the ancient Hebrew or Greek, probably. Humor and human are the first 3 words are the same. At any rate, Dave, more specifically, I was really elated to find that we have a lot of mutual interests in reading your books, and that's humor, obviously, and sex. As many of you know, I am a practicing sexologist. I don't practice much here, and I've found that there are not many people practicing here either. There's a lot of practice. There's a lot of golf. There's a great deal of canasta. Benefits are plentiful, and there's a lot of falling down, and that's what we do here. But what's really attracted me to Dave's work, and I'm just going to give you one title that I thought was very important and was in our subject area. It's how to make, it's Babies and Other Hazards of Sex. Some of you may remember that. And I go on with the quote, how to make a tiny person in 9 months with tools you have around the house. That's Dave Barry. I would think that at one time there was something else to do with the tool, but I don't know. But at any rate, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Pulitzer Prize winning author, columnist, and great humorist, Dave Barry, spelled either way you want.
Miles is available for weddings, bar mitzvahs. No, that was a wonderful introduction. Thank you. Yeah. I'm going to actually, never mind. I'll get to it. And thank you also to Jan Salta and to Jamie. I'm getting tired of hearing people thank Jamie, but I think you're supposed to do it. This is, the best writers' conference in the universe. I'm good now? Okay. No, I really, this is my second year here. I like coming to Rancho Mirage. It's like, makes me feel young. I mean, you're holding a writers' festival in a hospital, okay? Like the funeral home wasn't big enough. Anyway, I have one bone to pick with Jamie. Last night I came to the Putin panel. Did you see the Putin panel? Which basically came down to, and I'm going to quote the great Russian scholar Taylor Swift here. What I got out of it is Putin gonna poot. But I should have been on that panel. Yes, I went to Russia fall before last with my friend and co-author Ridley Pearson. There's a program the State Department runs where they send authors over to Russia to meet with Russians and talk about their work. And the idea is to improve relations between the two countries. So that didn't work out. But I was there when we went over. The State Department gave us this big fat list of warnings, basically, and they said you will probably be under surveillance. Your hotel room will probably be tapped, listened to, whatever the bugged. Your computers may be hacked into, and so on. You may even be accosted and hassled somewhat by the authorities. And some of those things did happen to us, and we're quite sure that our computers were in fact hacked into, and quite sure that our phones were tapped and stuff. But it was an interesting experience. I learned one thing, which I didn't hear the panel say last night, and I'm going to share it with you in case any of you go to Russia. This is very important. If you go to Russia, do not eat the Mexican food. I cannot stress this highly enough. The second night there, we were in Moscow, and it was late, and we just were hungry, and we went to the first restaurant that we came to, which was a Mexican restaurant run by Russians. And they're not even that good at Russian food. And I had what I later realized was a weaponized chimichanga. And I'm not going to get into too much detail about the effect that had, except to say if anybody was listening in on my hotel room, he's going to need years of therapy. But it was interesting. We met with with students, college students, even younger students, and older folks, and library groups and everything. And it was a little weird because I was trying to explain what I do. And it's very hard. I couldn't find anything to compare with in Russian society to what, because if you do what I do over in Russia, you wouldn't be allowed to do it. And we had slides, a little slideshow, PowerPoint presentation, and I was showing them the kinds of things that I write columns about. And one of them is one time I got an opportunity to drive the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile, and I picked up my son in middle school, which was the low point of his life, but I got to write a column about embarrassing the hell out of my son, and so I had a slide of the Wienermobile, and we're talking most of the time through interpreters, so it's a little slow to begin with, and humor's kind of tough to, and I would show this slide of me at the wheel of the Wienermobile and my son there looking sheepish, and they're looking at it, they're just baffled. They don't have Wienermobiles in Russia. And you could tell that they were thinking, how the hell did we lose the Cold War to these people? I was thinking of one thing Lee said about movies getting made. I had a book that got made into a movie called Big Trouble. And it happened that when we were in St. Petersburg, the consulate there, they have a movie night where they show movies to Russians, American movies, and it's usually something like White Christmas, But they said, well, you're going to come over, bring a DVD of your Big Trouble, and I brought it, and I hadn't really paid much attention to it. I hadn't seen it. They came out in the 90s, and the one thing I had learned from talking to the Russians, most audiences I would ask, what are your views of us? What do you think of us? And they would always say, well, we think, Americans tend to be shallow and just watch TV and don't care about any place other than the United States. In other words, they're completely correct. And I always say, well, what do you think we think about you? And they always say, you think all we do is, there's dancing bears and we just drunk on vodka all the time and we're all gangsters. And I said, no, we don't think that. Actually, I did think about the vodka, but... So anyway, I'm at the consulate in St. Petersburg, and they have this nice crowd there, and they watch the movie, which I'm not sure how much they understood. It's a movie about all these wacky hijinks going on in Miami. But then I had to get up and talk about the movie, and it's during the movie that I remember that there are gangsters in the movie, and they're Russians. And so I had to tell the audience that I was just kidding. I'm a humor writer. Anyway, I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be in a program with Lee Child. I got to talk to Lee a little bit before we came out, and I have long been a big fan of Lee and the Jack Reacher series. I love the idea of the Jack Reacher character going around. Loner, drifter, going around America, meeting Americans, and then eventually, for good reasons, beating the shit out of them, always. And I say that's kind of like what I do, but I use sarcasm. But anyway, it was good to meet you, and I want to extend Lee publicly an invitation to join a band I belong to called the Rock Bottom Remainders, which is an all-author band. Because Lee told me he plays bass and saxophone and guitar badly, which is perfect for our band. It's the Remainders. You may never have heard of them, and that's good for you. But it's authors. It's Mitch Albom, it's Stephen King, Amy Tan, Ridley Pearson, Roy Blunt Jr., Scott Turow, Greg Iles, a bunch of authors in the band. We're not a good band. We play what Roy Blunt Jr. described as hard-listening music. That's our genre. And I always say we play what I call the rumor method of music, which is to say we're all playing something, and then a rumor goes around the band that there's been a chord change. That, whoa, and we all play something else, but not necessarily the same, different thing. But we love it. We've raised a lot of money for literacy groups. Amy Tan said, I would do this to kill the whales. So you can be in our band, Lee, anytime. You're welcome. I've gotten in trouble a few times by writing about music, because that's always been sort of a big part of my life. I was in a band when I was in college. And one of the columns I wrote that got me in the most trouble, and this wasn't even the point of the column, and I want to stress that I don't believe this to be true anymore, but I wrote a column where I suggested that maybe Neil Diamond was not the greatest lyricist who ever lived. Okay, I was specifically referring to the song where Neil Diamond writes, sings with great intensity and passion the following lyric. I said to no one there, and no one heard it all, not even the chair. And I was like, well, no shit, Neil. I mean, it's a chair, Probably the table wasn't picking up on it either, because these are pieces of furniture. So anyway, that really wasn't the point of the column, but I did have a paragraph in there about that song. And whoa, you think Salman Rushdie got in trouble? There are a lot of very serious Neil Diamond people out there. They all wrote to me, letters with spittle dripping off. How dare you insult this musical genius, Mr. Barry? I've listened to Heartlight 19 times, and it cured my goiter, Mr. Barry. So before you, that kind of letter, I was like, so because I'm a humor columnist, I said, this is great. I will write a column about the Neil Diamond people. And so I did. I wrote a whole column about, look at these. Boy, I really ticked off the Neil Diamond people. But then it turned out there are a whole lot of anti-Neil Diamond people out there. And they all wrote me too. And they said, I agree with you. And then they wanted to talk about other songs they didn't like, which just turns out to be a big issue. People think Americans don't care about the issues, but this is one they care about. And I got thousands of letters in response that come up, songs people don't like. And I ended up writing a book about it. songs people don't like. And that was over 20 years ago, and people still tell me songs they don't like. People come and say, you know that song about the horse with no name? I hate that song, you know. The late Rich Denny, a wonderful comedian, was a friend of mine. He had a wonderful line about that song. He said, "You're in the desert. You got nothing to do. Name the freaking horse." But the worst problem I got into as a result of music was I found a news item one day that it involved the Denmark Zoo in Copenhagen, and there were some animals called okapi, which is some kind of African like antelope, and several of these okapi keeled over and died. And they died because it was determined that they were frightened by an opera company that was rehearsing outdoors, like 3 football fields away. I mean, it's very far, but it still killed these okapi. And so, of course, the question immediately comes to your mind is, what were 3 football fields doing in Denmark? No, so what came to my mind is like, if it's that hazardous to animals at that distance, think what it could do to human beings. And so I wrote a column suggesting that opera should be banned, because I've never been a fan. Anyway, the angriest mail that I've ever received was from opera, and the typical one would be, Mr. Barry, fuck you. But one person sent me a really interesting letter as a response to that column, and it was a person who was with the Eugene, Oregon Opera Company. And they said, we're putting on an opera called Gianni Schicchi that has a corpse in it. And we think it would be cool if you came out and played the part of the corpse in the opera. And so I did. I flew from Miami to Eugene, Oregon, which is not easy. You have to get on like a smaller and smaller and smaller planes. The last plane is just like, you'll have to fly it yourself. We can't fit you in a pilot. Just go until you see rain, and that's Eugene, Oregon, But they all made up and I had to lie on the stage for like a half an hour while these people with horribly loud voices shrieking, all around. And it's hard to be a corpse. It's hard to hold really still and be dead. And it was particularly hard for me because it happened that day the Miami Dolphins were playing the San Diego Chargers in a playoff game that I had money on. The Dolphins, and so I'm back to this old dead corpse watching backstage with the stagehands who don't pay any attention to the opera at all. And we're watching the TV backstage, and it's a good game. It's going back and forth, and then I had to go on to be the dead guy, and the stagehand said the bed is right next to the edge of the stage, so we can keep you posted on them. So I'm lying there, and they go. I would hear this, there's the opera guys, and then I would hear, Dolphins kick a field goal, and it's really hard for this corpse not to go, yes, that would be giving it away. But anyway, that was really all inspired by Lee. What I want to do, I'm going to talk a little bit about the book that I wrote most recently, and then I'm going to make a special announcement. So you'll want to stick around for that. The book, it's a series of essays on stuff that's been happening to me. Probably the scariest one is my daughter is about to turn 16, which means the state of Florida believes that she can drive. And the state of Florida, as I pointed out to her, believes anybody can drive. When alien beings land here, finally, they will have a valid Florida license already. With them. And I think I pointed this out last year, that everybody in Miami does drive according to the law of his or her individual country of origin. And in addition to we got a lot of seniors driving in South Florida. And I don't know if this goes on here. I suspect it does. It's what I call the seeing eye wife system. You know what I'm talking about? It's a couple, and the man drives. Why? Because the man drives, goddamn, But the man can no longer see. So he has outsourced that part of the driving to his wife, who's like, It's yellow, no. Red, it's red, no. You know, like So I'm worried about my daughter driving, and I've told her this, and her argument is, well, didn't you drive when you were a teenager? And I did. I drove, as soon as I turned 16, I got a license, I drove a lot. But I had a safety feature that she does not have. I drove my mom's 1961 Plymouth Valiant station wagon, which is the slowest vehicle ever made. The highest speed that vehicle ever reached was on the assembly line. After that, I could never go that fast again. And basically the same acceleration characteristics as a fire hydrant. So, like, you'd be driving and a tree would pass you, you know? So I'm worried about my daughter. So one of the things I did in the book, I wrote, because to get the license in Florida, you have to, like most states, you have to take a test, and they give you a driver's manual, Florida's driver's manual, which is just a tissue of lies. It says, like, you know, if you come to a stop sign, you're supposed to stop. Well, nobody in Miami does that. You know, that's a good way to get shot at. So I wrote for my daughter, as part of the book, a reality-based Q&A on Florida driving. So I just read you just a little bit from that. These are Q&As that are based on reality of driving in Florida. Q, how is the turn signal used in Florida? A, it is used to indicate to other motorists that you do not realize your turn signal is blinking. Q, could it also be used to signal your intention to turn or change lanes? A, interesting. Nobody has ever tried that. Q, what is the best kind of food to eat while driving? A, any food such as a sandwich, turkey leg, oyster, or ding dong that can be eaten one-handed, so you still have a hand free for texting. Q, what if an emergency situation arises that might require me to operate the steering wheel? A, use your forehead to honk the horn until the emergency has passed. Q, my car's engine seems to have stopped and I hear a burbling noise. What could be causing this? A, are you a senior citizen? Q, yes. A, you have driven into a swimming pool. That happens a lot in Miami. I may have mentioned this last year that the Miami police stopped a 72-year-old man driving a Chevrolet Cobalt on runway 9 of Miami International Airport. Q, I've had a few drinks. How can I tell if I should drive? A, take this simple test. Are you wearing your underpants on your head? Q, not my underpants, no. A, then you are good to go. I have an essay in there. I call it the Real Madman, which is based on. I'm a big fan of the TV show Mad Men, and I had one. And I grew up in that era. I grew up in suburban New York City. I grew up in a little town called Armonk, New York. My dad rode the train every day with the other dads, and they all came back reeking of bourbon and cigarettes. But that was the life back. And our neighbors were advertising. So I grew up in that era around those people, and I kind of thought it was a pretty good depiction in this show, except for one thing, which is nobody ever seems to have any fun in Mad Men. Everybody's kind of dour. And I remember my childhood very differently from that. My parents had fun. I mean, they went up won World War II, and they came back, and they're going to party. And they didn't stop. Like my generation, baby boomers, we partied, and then as soon as we had kids, we stopped and became obsessive about being parents, and we never had fun again. They didn't stop. My parents didn't stop. They've been through World War II and the Depression. What was, parenting going to be? So they didn't care. They smoked, they drank, they ate food with gluten in it. And their parenting style was very relaxed. It was like, go out and play, be back by June, So I have an essay about that. That's mainly the point of it, that I really think they all died much younger than they probably should have, but they had fun while they were there. I have an essay in there about going to Brazil for the World Cup. My wife is a sports writer, and she covers soccer, covers the World Cup, and also we're kind of into soccer in my family. And my daughter's on a travel soccer team. I don't know if you've been through that, but when you're on a travel soccer team, what that means is every weekend you get in your car and you drive 200 miles to play soccer against another team that also drove 200 miles. Sometimes you both started in the same place. But you have to go 200 miles. The reason being you have to get to some place where it's raining. It's always raining. If you want to end your drought here in California, have my daughter come out and play soccer, and it will not be a problem. But anyway, we went to Brazil for the World Cup, and when I went to Brazil, I did all this research, and it was all said the same thing. And everybody I talked to in Miami, a lot of Miami people are Brazilian or been to Brazil. They all said the same thing. It's a beautiful country. The people are beautiful. Don't wear any jewelry. Don't carry any money. Because basically every guidebook says the same thing. You're going to be robbed at knife point on the street. And they even tell you should carry like a little wad of money just to give them so they'll go away, you know. And so I bought all this special clothing with hidden pockets, you know. And I had money all over me. I was like the Michelin man of money. And when my daughter and I got there, my wife was off at another city in Brazil covering a game. My daughter, when we arrived, and we go out, and it's like our first, you know, out of the hotel, first few minutes. And I just heard all the stuff about what was going to happen. And sure enough, when we got out on the street, nothing happened. And nothing continued to happen for 2 weeks. And we were not always in good neighborhoods, but we never had any problem. It became kind of a joke with us about, you know, how terrified we'd been of Brazil and how we were going to get robbed. And it occurred to me that if you wanted to make money, what you could do is go down to Brazil and meet Americans coming off the plane and rob them at knife point, because I was ready. You know, anybody that come near me, I would have thrown money at them, you know. And you don't even have to show them a knife. Show them a receipt for a knife, and they'll give you money. But anyway, Brazil. I like Brazil. I'm going there again for the Olympics this year. So there's an essay in there called "Everything I Know About Home Ownership I Learned from Johnny Carson," and this is based on a true anecdote. The first book I ever wrote back in the early 80s was a humor book called The Taming of the Screw, which was a parody of a do-it-yourself book. A humor book, do-it-yourself. So it wasn't really a do-it-yourself book. Anyway, I had never done any publicity of any kind, never written a book before. The first TV appearance I did was on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. I don't know how this happened to this day. This woman, producer out there, called me up, said, "I got your book." She was this older lady who smoked a lot. "I got your book. It's funny. Are you funny?" You know. So she kind of auditioned me over the phone, and they flew me out. So I'm fly out there and get off and a limo picks me up and takes me to the studio. And there's like, there's a dressing room that said Dick Cavett. There's a dressing room that said Pointer Sisters, and a dressing room that said Dave Barry. And that was the lineup that night. And this woman whose name was Shirley Wood, the producer, came in like half an hour before the show was supposed to start. And goes, "Do you remember what you're supposed to say?" And I go, "Yeah." She says, "Drink this." And she gave me a tumbler of wine to drink. So I went out and did the Tonight Show, and it was fabulous. Johnny Carson was charming. He had, asked great questions, asked them perfectly, reacted. Audience loved it. It was. And I thought, geez, this is so easy, television, so easy. Later, after 43,000 bad interviews, I realized it was easy because I was being interviewed by the best there was. But anyway, we didn't really talk off air, Johnny Carson and I. We just did the thing. But at the end of the show, the band is playing, and as soon as the light goes out, he lights a cigarette. And this is the only actual interchange we had that wasn't on air. He said, "I used to do it yourself. I used to try to do it yourself. You can't do shit yourself." And I realized later that after years of owning homes that he was absolutely right, that you really can't. I mean, there are probably people in this audience who are skilled at fixing things, but I'm not, and most people are not, and yet we're kind of led to believe they are. Most of us end up with what I call the man in the truck system of fixing things. When something goes wrong, you call in a man in the truck. And And it's embarrassing if you're like, a guy, because you should be able to do, but you can't, and he can. And, and he always starts by asking you something you can't answer, like, Mr. Barry, can you show me where your matriculation valve is? And I'm like, and I'm usually like looking at, the TV screen. I mean, my computer screen is showing like some Japanese TV show where people in their underpants are falling into vats of mud. That's my job. That's what I'm doing. But it doesn't look good to him. He wants to know, and I don't know where it is. He goes away and finds it. And then he comes back, and this is the worst part of it, of the man with the truck system. And it's hard to be a guy in this situation, but you have to go through it. He comes and says, Mr. Barry, I want to show you something. They always have to show you something. And it's never a good thing. They never say, you see this? That's exactly the way that should be. It's always like, that's going to cost you, like, I don't know who did that. I always want to say, whoever did that came here in a truck. I'll tell you that right now. But so anyway, I came up with this idea because what happens is people are led to believe they can fix things and do things themselves. The big culprit there is Home Depot, which has these ads where, like, there's this happy homeowner couple in the Home Depot store, and they're looking at, tile samples with the cheerful, helpful Home Depot salesman, and then cut to the next scene, they have a completely new bathroom that they did themselves. No, never does that happen. So I came up with an idea for what I call a new chain of stores called reality-based hardware. And the idea behind reality, it would be the opposite of Home Depot. When you go in there with a do-it-yourself project idea in mind, they would talk you out of it. And so I have a sample dialogue between a reality-based hardware salesperson, employee, and a homeowner. And the homeowner says, I want to install a ceiling fan. And the employee says, really? Homeowner, yes. Employee, you want to install a machine with long, sharp blades whirling at high speeds directly over the heads of live human beings? Homeowner, well, yes. Employee, I see. And do you have any particular expertise in this area? Any training in the field of ceiling fan installation? Homeowner, no, not in ceiling fan installation per se. Employee, and what then? Homeowner, I'm a dentist. Employee, I see. And would you be comfortable having a professional ceiling fan installer give you a root canal? Homeowner, well, no, but that's a different. Employee, I'd like you to take a look at this photograph of a recent do-it-yourself ceiling fan installation. Homeowner, my God, is that employee? Yes, his hand. It landed about 8 feet away. One of the more, to me, meaningful parts of the book involves my grandson. My son had a son, and so I'm now a grandfather. And my son married a Jewish woman, as did I. My wife is Jewish. She's Cuban Jewish. Jubin, they call themselves. Really, they do. They didn't come over on rafts. They parted the Caribbean. But so my son, following in that tradition, also married a Jewish woman. They had a boy, and they decided that he should have a bris. Now, for the benefit of the goyim in the audience, a bris is a thing when a male Jewish child is born. They have a ritual circumcision followed by deli platters. Sometimes on the same surface. So anyway, my son called me up and said, I was obviously going to be there. And he said, we would like you to be the Sandek, which is the person, it's considered a great honor. You hold the baby during this procedure, and I was chosen for that. So I was curious. I mean, I'm a big fan of Judaism. It's a wonderful religion, but I never got the bris thing. I'm okay with circumcision, I don't need to fill you with too much information here, but I'm for circumcision. But I don't see, the need to make a big, public thing on it. But anyway, so I looked it up in the Bible, which is online. I didn't know they had the internet back then, but apparently, anyway. So here's the story, and it's very clear in the Bible why they do this. Abraham, who, as you know, became the father of the Jewish people. Abraham, he's 99 years old. 99 years old. Bear that in mind. God comes to him, which is never a good thing. It's kind of like the guy with the truck coming to show you. God, it's never fun. The reason God has come to you, it's never like, hey, I turned the Dead Sea into beer. Go take a look. It's always he wants you to smite somebody or sacrifice your child or something. Anyway, he comes to Abraham and it says, good news, you're going to be the father of the Jewish people. You're going to be fruitful. You're going to multiply. And we're going to give you the land of Canaan, which is the biblical term for what we now call Long Island. And so it's all good. And then God says, but as a token of the covenant between us, you have to circumcise yourself and every male member of your household. Yeah. And you don't even have a penis, I'm guessing, from your voice. So, and I'm thinking, why does that have to be why can't they just shake hands? Speaking of shaking hands, he's 99. Think about this. You're in the household, and Abraham comes toward you with a knife. And he says, guess what God told me to do, He's like, did God put that in writing for you? Or we're taking your word for it here. So anyway, I had to do that. I had to do the hold them. Well, the moil, which is the Hebrew word for snipper, did it. So anyway, we come now to my announcement. Well, first I want to talk a little bit about the presidential race that's going on. Yeah, and I know people here are very involved in politics, and I know we've had many presidents come to visit Sunnylands. President Obama's coming, I understand, in February. You do know he's African American, right? Did they know? Oh, I'm just checking. So anyway, I've covered lots of presidential races. Starting back in 1984, I've covered them all. I've gone to the caucuses and the primaries. I've gone to the conventions. And I've seen some pretty weird things. And I've been entertained by things. Often I find the media to be the funniest part of the process. I will give you just one example. I could give you many. The conventions are kind of a joke. You probably know that. There's no real reason to go to them, and there's no real reason to show them on television because everybody already knows what's going to happen and no news occurs. And yet, that's usually the biggest press corps, political press corps we get every 4 years. And it's kind of preposterous the way we overcover things. The one example I'm really familiar with, I was involved in 1988, I was in Atlanta for the Democratic Convention where they nominated Michael Dukakis. You maybe don't remember him. He was a Massachusetts governor, very smart guy, but because of a genetic defect, he was limited to the same range of facial expressions as an iguana. So he'd be making some point sounding good, and an insect would fly by and his tongue would flick out, So anyway, the convention was over before it started. He picked Lloyd Benson to be his running mate, and it's like to all the conventions, it's like, why are we here? So one day I'm outside the convention center, and there's like this protest area, and it's like, random news people just gathered looking for anything to write about. And a young woman, probably a college student, walks by carrying a rat, a pet rat, like a laboratory rat. And as I'm watching, a photographer sees her and comes running over and takes her picture. And another photographer sees that and comes running. And then some TV guys come over. And pretty soon she's surrounded by people taking pictures of her rat And I'm thinking, like, how pathetic are we? This is what, and that night I saw the Rat on 2 Atlanta television stations. The Rat. I saw more of the Rat than Lloyd Benson, who was So I'm thinking, like, this is sad that we've come to this in the media. So to sort of test how bad it was, the next day, 2 other columnists and I did a little experiment. We got boxes, mine was from a telephone, and we put them over our heads and we had slits cut out for our eyes. And we went out to the protest area and stood there, 3 guys with boxes over their heads. We didn't announce anything. We just went out and did that. And immediately, the Rat had nothing on this. This was big news. Immediately, we were surrounded. I later saw a photograph taken from high up in a building where there were dozens and dozens of people surrounding us, asking us questions, taking pictures. And we were very honest. They would say, like, who are you? And we'd say, we're people with boxes over our heads. And they say, what are you doing? And we'd say, we're standing here with boxes on our head. That's all we said. And the next day, that became national news. The UPI and AP both ran protest roundups, and in both protest roundups, we were the lead story. Our photograph was in dozens of newspapers. Well, we all wrote columns about that, how ridiculous that was. And then we got in trouble. And we got all these calls. I remember seeing the phone kept ringing and ringing. Why did you hoax the media? I said, we didn't hoax the media. We had boxes on our head, and we said we had boxes on our head. If we'd said we had boxes on our head and we didn't, that would hoax the media. But you're the people who thought it was worth putting on, the front page of your paper. So, and in several states, we finished ahead of Michael Dukakis. So I was going to point that out. But so anyway, I've seen a lot of. I've never seen anything like this year. It's wonderful. Like if you're me, bad is good if you're a humor columnist. And this is an amazing year. The Republican race totally dominated by Donald Trump, whose vision is laid out a very appealing vision to some people for America, consisting of whatever thought is flitting through his mind at that particular moment, and sending out angry tweets. But it's working, and he was at just recently. Now he's courting the evangelical vote. He said he loves Jesus. He plays golf with them all the time, And he's kind of like destroying his big opponent is Ted Cruz, and it's kind of been entertaining to watch how Trump has sort of handled that, constantly suggesting that he doesn't think that Ted Cruz is not a natural-born citizen, but somebody's going to suggest that, and maybe he should get a judge to prove that he's, because how do we know? Prove you're a natural-born citizen and never had sex with a camel. We don't know, get a judge to say you never had. Anyway, so there's that dynamic. Then it's just kind of the second tier. Marco Rubio, who I think is, 14 years old, and then Jeb Bush, and then kind of dropping now, Ben Carson, who I think is dropping because nobody understands what he says. He mumbles a lot. And you kind of picture a problem if he were commander-in-chief in the Oval Office and he issues the command and his aides are like, okay, either he said we should launch the attack or he wants a snack. Then we have, on the Democrat side, Bernie Sanders. Have you thought about what would happen to Rancho Mirage if Bernie Sanders... You'd be looking at some combination of higher taxes and beheadings. So I would adjust your portfolios accordingly. He is gaining strength against the front runner, Hillary Clinton, who has... I would say there's 2 things about Hillary Clinton that you know for sure. 1, she genuinely, sincerely wants to make your life better. And 2, if you try to stop her, she will kill you. And I just, today, Michael Bloomberg is talking about, obviously the Times had a story that Michael Bloomberg is talking about making a run, because obviously what we need is more New York billionaires who think they're God. So I think there's a good chance Hubert Humphrey will get into it before this thing is over. I know he's dead, but it's that kind of year. I think he'll, I think he'd do okay. Better than Jeb, probably. Some Jeb supporters out there. But anyway, the way I break it down, like, I'm not a particularly political human being, but there's like basically two schools of thought about how to run the country. And I compare it like, let's say you're broken down, your car broke down, you're by the side of the road standing next to your car, it's broken down. The Republicans will just go right by you and say, hey, learn to fix the car yourself. You'll be better off for it, The Democrats will stop to help you, but they will make it worse. So those are our choices. Ointment or suppository. Which is why I want to make my announcement, and I will pause after I make it for your spontaneous applause. I am running for president also. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to tell you where I stand. I'm not a wishy-washy politician. I'm not the kind of person who holds his finger to the wind every time, that needs a focus group to make a decision. I'll lay it on the line. I'll tell you what I think. I'm sorry if it hurts your feelings, but this is where I stand. I agree with you. And everything. And if you change your mind, let me know. That's the kind of leadership I'd like to provide. I do have a couple of policies. One is, I've felt this way for a long time. I favor the death penalty for whoever is responsible for making Americans use low-flow toilets. You people are old enough to remember, there's a time we had great toilets in this country. Our toilets were the envy of the world. We had toilets that could suck down a mature sheep. Not that we did, but oh, really? I missed all the signs that was supposed to running out of time. Okay, I'm going to close with. Do I have time for one inspirational? Yes. Yeah. Okay. I'm many more next year. No. We need solutions in this country, and I'm prepared to provide them. And I'm going to tell you what the template I will use for solving the problems. And this is a true story. This is my favorite single anecdote that ever happened. I'm very familiar with it. I've talked to many people who were there. It's absolutely true. And if you don't believe me, you can go to YouTube and you can see what I'm about to describe to you. It really did happen. And it's an example of how, when you face a problem, you can overcome that problem, or you can try to overcome that problem. And the problem was, in this case, there was a storm off the coast of Oregon, and when it cleared, there was a huge dead whale on the beach, had washed up on the beach, too far for the waves to take it back. It was a 43-foot-long, 8-ton whale, and it was dead, and it was rotting and stinking. And I've talked to people who lived in the area who said the stench was horrible. So that's the problem. That's the obstacle that needs to be overcome. Just as we have so many obstacles that need to be overcome in this country. The decision was made in this case to bring in the Oregon State Highway Department. It was called the Oregon State Highway Division. I'm really not sure what the thinking was there. I guess a whale is a big thing, and a highway is also a big thing. So somebody thought it was a good skills mix. And so there's a TV news broadcast of this day that's the most wonderful news broadcast in history. And it begins with a guy who has become a friend of mine because of this story, named Paul Lindman, then a young TV reporter. He's standing in front of this whale, a giant whale. And he goes, big whale with seagulls walking around. He goes, you might say they had a whale of a problem. The TV guy. And he then introduced the head of the Oregon State Highway Division crew. Who is a serious-looking man in a hard hat, who doesn't come right out and say they've never disposed of a dead whale before, but you begin to suspect that might be the case when he reveals that the solution that they've arrived at is to use dynamite. This is all absolutely true. And sure enough, behind him, they're digging a hole under the whale, and they're putting big things of dynamite under the whale. It's a highway crew. I don't know if they followed the full highway crew procedure and put orange cones behind the whale and a guy with a flag, in case another whale comes along, But anyway, the guy explains the plan. This is the hard hat man explains the plan. They're going to blow up the whale with the dynamite. The whale will then be in tiny pieces. These pieces will then be eaten by the seagulls and other marine scavengers. And there you'll have it, a textbook whale disposal. So the next scene, they back the camera up behind a sand dune a quarter of a mile from the whale. So you're looking over and they've also backed up the spectators, and quite a large crowd showed up to see this event. Because let's be honest with ourselves, if you knew they were blowing up a dead whale anywhere in Rancho Mirage tonight, you would not be here, okay? So anyway, you're looking over the sand dune at the whale, and it's a peaceful scene. There's the Pacific, there's the waves rolling in, there's the whale, there's seagulls walking around on the whale. And then you hear a countdown, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then you hear an explosion. Huge cloud of smoke envelops the whale. You can't see the whale at all at this point. And then you hear some people cheering, going, yay. Then you hear a voice go, oh my God. And then a smear appears on the camera lens. And then it goes dark. Because what's happening now is gravity, which apparently no one had told the Oregon State Highway Division about. Gravity is causing, and I talked to people who were there that day and said this was so disgusting. The rotted insides of a dead whale are coming down out of the sky. All over the place, all over the beach, all over the spectators, and well beyond. And some of these are very large pieces of whale. And we know this because the next scene we see is in the parking lot, where the cameraman has run with everybody else fleeing this goo from hell. And he finally gets his camera cleaned off enough to get it going again. And the first thing you see is a car whose entire roof has been caved in by what looks like a booger the size of a refrigerator. And wouldn't you like to listen in on the phone call to that insurance agent? You know? You say your car was struck in a parking lot by a whale. Oh, a whale from the sky. Then the camera goes back out on the beach, and there on the beach where the whale had been is the whale. It's a different shape now. But there's a large quantity of whales still there. What there is no longer any of on the beach is seagulls. Maybe some seagull molecules. Any intact seagulls are on their way to Alaska at this point. What does this story tell us about the direction this country needs to take? And in conclusion, what I would say is, as President of the United States, I will do what I can in agreement with you to solve the problems facing this nation, and I will never ask the Oregon State Highway Division to help me. Anyway, thank you all. Jamie, thanks again.